Hey friends, we are about to enter into the last session in our study of Philippians, and so we're looking at chapter 4 of Philippians. The study that we've been in for the last several weeks is all about finding joy. That's the short name for this series, but the truth is we live in a broken world, so the longer name for this series has been finding joy in the midst of a junk-filled world.
Yeah.
And this is one of those chapters where Paul is dealing both with the very high view of what that joy can do, but also with the reality of a junk-filled world.
Yeah, he starts off, ironically, as you and I were talking, that after all these lofty goals and all these challenges and their gospel going forward, even though he's incarcerated and challenging the church to be the church to the world, it comes back to this this story that lives on in infamy, the story of two women who are at odds with one another.
Yeah. So Paul actually names names. Think of that. There's some kind of a personal dispute that's going on in the church in Philippi between two women. Their names are Euodia and Syntyche. And news has gone viral because of the way this whole thing has been handled. Yeah. And it's gotten all the way to Rome.
Yeah.
And so he's writing in this chapter at the outset with the news of these two women and kind of urging them to say, can you find a way to make peace over this? Take the same mindset of Jesus and get on the same page with Jesus, to two people who he calls co-workers.
Yes.
So they've been co-laborers with Paul. He knows them well.
Yeah. Their servants starts off at the very beginning, chapter 1. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ Jesus, learning to serve one another. And he's challenged them as co-laborers, co-servants with him. You've got to work this out, ladies.
So here's one of the things that becomes a reality, that our relationships matter to God because they ultimately impact the church. And our faith is not just about our ideological beliefs or our theology, it's also about our relationships. Mm-hmm. And so before Paul can go on, he's urging these two people, find a way to wrestle this thing through and set it aside, because whatever your bickering is about, it is not as important as their partnership in the gospel, which has been the driving force throughout this whole letter.
Right, that's right. And as you were pointing out, following on the theme, Paul, one of the keys to following this book of Philippians is the concept of the verbs, and you focused on that last week. And I think what did you say? There are 4 verbs that are important in this passage.
Yeah, so we'll just list them, and you can dive into them a bit further. But twice he says, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord. I will say it again, rejoice. And then he says, give thanks in everything. So here we are at the Thanksgiving season, and Paul is reminding us of the importance of Thanksgiving. That this wasn't just about gathering family together and having a big meal. This was really about thanking God. And the third challenge that he gives, or the last one, is to think about things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy. And he says, whatever it is that you can find that is excellent and uplifting, think on these things. Mm-hmm. And then there's a promise that comes on the heels of that as we do that, the God of peace will be with us, and he will guard our hearts and our minds. And that's what we really want. That's the right. God of peace to be active in our lives.
And to take it back again to the relational side, it struck me as I was looking at this passage that after going whatever and whatever, whenever, and those are sort of lofty at times, and they're out there. And then he says, so if you still don't get this, look at my life and whatever you've seen and heard and seen in me. So it goes again back to that practical and the relational side. The women are at odds, but he's saying, look, whatever you've seen in me in my last visit, so that you understand that this is doable.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, that this is doable. It's not some magic, but it is a real live person who's living this out in the midst of less than stellar circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we have to consider as we move forward, as we close this out. But yet, like with the Engage series, we want this theme of being imitators and servants. We want it to move on into this next new year as we approach
Right.
Christmas and then beyond.
Right.
So last thoughts as we wrap up this series.
Well, one of the interesting thoughts that hits me is every time I teach the 101 class, our membership class here at North River, there's a little acrostic that I built years ago that takes the 10 letters from the words north and river, and we had a value for each of those letters. And the last one comes right here from Philippians. It's about reproducing servants. And I'll often have people say, what's that all about? And the simple reality is that one of the hallmarks of North River Community Church is reproducing servants who have the heart of Jesus, because Jesus came to serve us. And therefore, he calls us to have the same mindset, the same heart, the same attitude, and to serve other people. So, along with our Thanksgiving this year, perhaps what we ought to think about are people that you're grateful for who are part of our local church. And maybe we ought to have some room in there for a time of confession for some of the bickering or some of the relational squabbles that you and I haven't handled as well as we should have.
Yeah.
Because those get in the way of our partnership in the gospel.
Yeah.
And that is what ultimately matters to God, how we serve him well in this day. We're looking for that well done, good and faithful servant at the end of life. And part of that is learning to live in and with the peace of God. And we're going to make mistakes in this area. But we can also, if we're teachable, we can take the challenges that Paul gives us here, and we can actually improve the quality of our lives. Here's the ultimate payoff. Our non-Christian friends are watching at the way that we live.
Yes.
And what they ultimately want to see is, okay, you Christians and your faith in Jesus, does it change your life and does it make it better?
Yes.
Paul's argument is that when we have the mindset of Christ, it does. And so we can turn all these things over to him.
Great challenge, a great ending, and a great launch as we anticipate the holidays and the new year. Thanks for being a part of this, and we look forward to hearing what God is going to be doing in and through your study of this, and as you apply it and live it out, that you would experience the joy of knowing Jesus finding joy in the junk-filled world. Thanks again for being part of this study over these last few weeks.
Rejoice, my friends.